I'm live. Okay, that's where the camera is. Hello, everybody. So I'm assuming that you all know my name already. I'm Zeli, and this is the Church of the Former Day Saints in the most unprovocative title ever. Heaven and Hell, Church of the Former Day Saints. It's like, that sounds like a cult right there, just the beginnings of it in a way. Partly because we took our name as a parody from a cult. So, either way. Uh, Today, sort of, I do a lot of sporadic videos, I suppose. But one thing that I found recently was this set of answers to this set of questions that I actually answered a long time ago. And that was back when I was a bit more evil and a bit less humble about it. Not to say I'm humble now, because that'd be preposterous and self-defeating. But um, that was back in the day when that was before basically when I really dedicated my life to God and seeking out truth for Him and doing ministry for Him. So it's it's interesting, but either way, I'm gonna get another crack at it. And basically, this guy, his YouTube name is The Friendly Atheist, and he asks a lot of questions for Christians, and some of them are friendly. So hey, we'll see. We'll see how this goes. Hopefully, I have improved my presentation skills back since then, and my overall demeanor and countenance towards people who are not like me. I hope so, at least, because back then I was a bit more snarky, and who knows if I still am, but I hope I'm not as snarky. Either way, let's get into it. The first questions are totally easy. They're like, is Anne Frank burning in hell right now? That's the first one. Easy. Is Gandhi burning in hell right now? And then is this other guy, I forgot his name, uh, Fred Felt, Felt, no, Filtz. I don't know, forgot his name. Basically, the pastor of the Westboro Baptist Church. From what I remember, when I had to look up who these people were, Anne Frank is a Jewish girl from the Holocaust. Gandhi is Gandhi, and Fred Phelps or whatever his name is a pastor from the Westboro Baptist Church. And is he in heaven right now? That's the question. I'm sorry. I think I said something different before. And so, yeah, let's get started with that. I think the underlying questions first of all are what constitutes a person. What constitute? What are the criteria for a person getting into heaven and getting into hell? How does that all work out? What's the process and all of that sort of fun stuff? And then another underlying question I believe would be, is it possible, or do good people, supposedly what we would call the not so bad, acting out in the real world, mostly good behavior, do those sorts of people go to heaven, or do they really go to hell just because they don't fit this dogmatic criteria that Christianity sort of proposes? And then the opposite is true. Is Does someone who particularly seems like a bad person, do they go to heaven just because they fit a particular criteria that Christianity sort of arbitrarily decides? Though it's not arbitrary, I shouldn't say that. But that's sort of the question that's being asked, from what I can understand, from what I can tell. And then, to answer that, of course, there are lots of little dynamics that go into that. Like, for instance, what's heaven and what's hell? Do we even know what that is? And I don't think we do. The Bible sort of gives hints, but doesn't really tell us. And then we have lots of theories about it. Of course, the popular general theory that the Christians propose is that hell is um, a place of eternal torment, conscious torment, and then heaven is a place of eternal conscious bliss. And okay, that's a bit harsh, but then it seems, and there have been uh, put forth a number of arguments to sort of uh, to validate those claims in a way, or to defend those claims. And I know a few of them, but I'm not sure if I subscribe to them entirely. Really, what does the Bible really say about heaven and hell? I'll start with hell because that's the easy one. Um, so hell is sort of like there are a few different things that the Bible talks about that we sort of all just kind of meld together as place of bad stuff, and then that's called hell. You know, that's sort of it seems like that's sort of our attitude towards it. That's a place where we don't want to be, so that's hell. And then we equate that with what we define hell as by as per Dante's Inferno. That's sort of where we get all of our ideas for what hell is, and that's an interesting way of looking at it in a way. But then the Bible sort of talks about three particular places. There's Hades, there's Gehenna, and then there's a place of outer darkness, which has weeping and gnashing of teeth. So Hades is sort of just described as the grave. Um, oh, actually, well, these are New Testament terms. You could talk about the Old Testament terms, and I've found two. One of them is sort of like a sleeping, sort of. That's the connotation that you get. Then the second one is Sheol, and this one, generally speaking, from what I've seen, is more like the grave. And then, of course, in the ancient world, if you go to a place of darkness, then that darkness is the place where light is absent. And then this is these aren't just these physical light and darkness that we see, but it's really actually this metaphysical chaos and order that we get to that that are real in a way. Because if you're in darkness and you can't see anything, then what is real is really what's in here. It's what's in your mind. And like if you're in absolute darkness, then everything that exists, in a sense, is what you perceive, and the only things you perceive are the things that are in your mind, and that can be some bad stuff. That can be some scary stuff. Um, but it also might not be, and that's why it's chaos, is because you don't know what's really there. And especially, I mean, that's just besides the physical sense, because your senses have no idea what's anywhere, especially if it's really quiet. And then when your mind just sort of makes stuff up, um, like what could be lurking over there? Is there a monster over there? Is it just darkness? Why can't I see anything? Is there a rock that I'm going to trip over? To put in a more mundane way. But either way, that darkness is seen as chaos. And so if you go to the grave, which is a place of darkness, then you go to the place of chaos, essentially. And and that's why I think there's another euphemism for death, which is to sleep. And that's a place where more or less you dream. You could call it like a place of paradise in a way. And those are the Old Testament terms from what I've been able to gather, just from my biblical studies, not from any extra biblical stuff like theological studies or studies into Judaism. I know Judaism has essentially, but there's one place of more or less torment. Well, we won't get into that until I get finished. then there's the lake of fire. That's a bit more fiery, isn't it? Um, but the lake of fire seems to be a place where you go when you're destroyed. Like it's a place where the garbage heap, it's the garbage heap of the society in the valley of Gehenna, and it's where the fire, it's a place where the fire is always going, and but the fire, but doesn't mean you are always in the fire. It means well, you die and you get wiped out, and the worms eat you. And that's what one of the possible interpretations of hell that I've seen on the Christian side too is a temporary sort of hell. You know, where you have those who were not very much worse. And then you have the place of outer darkness where there's weeping and gnashing of teeth. And I've already said that darkness is more or less chaos. And so if you can imagine that there's this place that's away from the light of God and it's in the darkness, away from God. That's typically what we define hell as, is being away from God. And so if this place is the place of outer darkness and there's weeping and gnashing of teeth, there's obviously some sort of tragedy that goes on there. There's death, pain, and suffering, etc. And then there's lack of light. And I think depending on how you use it, like all the examples I mentioned before, you could view all of those as being relatively synonymous with hell as we perceive it now. But you could also view it in different ways. For instance, if you were to view hell as a temporary place, you might have a problem with the Hades one, but the outer darkness and the Gehenna, that'd be okay. If you view hell as a place of purification where you go in there and you pay your dues in a way, and then you get to go into paradise. It's sort of like a universal purgatory idea. Then that's sort of that's you can get there with the Bible if you just have the Bible, and then a knowledge of the culture at the time. And so that's sort of the problem is Christianity kind of just dogmatically chooses one, and then I've seen the arguments on both sides, like annihilationism and then the typical narrative for hell that we see today. And they're not very intellectually fulfilling in a way. They have their holes, I should say. And I think that maybe they both have some things right with them, maybe they both have some things wrong with them, and that's why sort of I veered away from a little bit of my fundamentalism back when I originally did this video. Which, I was much more of a fundamentalist back then, and now I still am, but it just depends on how you define fundamentalist. So, back to the hell thing. I think one thing we should probably touch on is this idea of dogma. Because, should I? No, not really. We'll skip that one for now. Going back to then the hell is, how do we know what we know? Yes, I think I can run with that. So how do we know that our version of hell is what it is? I don't think the Bible's very clear on it, and we sort of just pick one, like I said, and we run with it. And I don't think that that's really how it should be, because what if we're wrong? And that's a pretty big claim to be wrong with. and then there's also the problem of who goes to hell. There's not really clear. There are a couple places that are more clear than others, but it seems like a lot of it weighs heavily on the actions of like our deeds. they say in Christianity you can't work your way into heaven, but I think you can work your way into hell. There's another topic. Is what's between heaven and hell? Is there a place between heaven and hell? There are all these questions and possibilities, and you can come up with so many answers just off the Bible itself. And so it's like you don't know. You don't know. Okay. So if there's a place between heaven and hell, how would you be able to know? And where would it say it in the Bible? And who goes there? And then what is it like? And then the Catholics sort of have this idea that there's hell, there's heaven, and then there's purgatory. But I'm not really talking about purgatory, because purgatory was still a place of torment where you were purified. I think hell is, at least the Jewish idea of hell is more like purgatory. So then, and then, we just don't know these answers. We don't know how to answer these questions. And we act like we do a lot of times, but we just don't know. Okay, so then what about heaven? It's a bit more clear. Like, if you have faith in God, if you have a relationship in God, then He pretty much guarantees that you go to heaven, sort of, kind of, sort of. Yeah, it still partially weighs on your actions, it seems, because there are certain things that you can do that, even if you profess that He's the Lord, it's not really gonna work. It even says, many will come in my name, and they'll come to me and say, Lord, Lord, have we not really done many great things in your name? And they'll say, get away from me, you workers of iniquity. Workers. That's kind of a weird thing to say if we get into heaven just by saying a prayer. So there's that issue there is an element of works that goes into being a Christian, and I think a lot of people don't know that. I think that's an issue, and so there's this sort of an ambiguity about how we get into heaven, how we get into hell, and then how, like, what does that even mean? And are those the only places? And then what do those places look like? I don't know. Well, I have my ideas, but the purpose is really ultimately just to sort of throw up the idea into the air and see what we can come up with. Because what does the Bible really say about all of that? And I think I have an answer. But first, of course, we know the different Christian answers to that is there is the idea that there's obviously eternal conscious torment, and that's hell, that we know of. That's the popular definition. That's what we find in Dante's Inferno. And then can't today. And then we have this other idea brought about by the annihilationists. And that's not really a popular Christian idea. It's not something that is like orthodoxy. So I don't take much weight to that, but what is annihilationism basically says is you pay your dues in hell and then you get destroyed. That's one way of looking at it. But then there's another annihilationist where you don't even go to a place of torment, you just get destroyed. Unless you're a particularly bad person. Like if you're the Antichrist, and then you go to hell in that sense. And so that's another Christian idea, is this annihilationism. Then there's a very, very minute minority of Christianity that sort of believes you go to hell for a little bit and then you get into heaven, sort of like a purifying and then hall pass sort of idea or something like that. You pay for your sins and then you get to go to heaven. And so those are the Christian answers that I've come to realize or come across. The Jewish answers are they're like the opposite in a way, because for the Christian, the most popular view is the hell version, and then the least popular view is the purification version. And for a Jew, it's the opposite. For a Jew, it's like the most popular view is hell is like this purification type of thing, and it's just like a purification, like if you were to get some gold and you wanted to purify it, but it had a lot of dirt or impurities in it, then you'd pass it through the fire more times than if you were to find some gold with a little bit of impurities in it. You'd pass it through the fire a few less times. And so that's sort of the idea of purification in the Jewish thought process. And that's, those people are purified, and then they get to go off to the Olam Haba, which is the new world, basically what Christians would call heaven. Sort of different, but it'll work for now for our working definitions. And but if you're a particularly bad person, then you can be destroyed. And so they sort of view it as like an annihilationism. And then there's some that view it as mostly like a majority annihilationism sort of deal, where you go to hell for a little bit, or you're destroyed right away, or you're destroyed a little bit later. And then of course there's a minority of Jews who think that there is a place of eternal torment, conscious torment. So it's like reversed in a way, which I think is very interesting. And so let's see. Looking at all of those options, I think me, I'm a messianic, so I get to sort of pick what I want in a way. Not really, but if I find fault in one area of a religion, and then I think that the other one is a better option, I get to sort of or a better answer, I get to sort of like, hey, I like that one, let me add that one to mine. I get to make like an amalgam of synchronistic biblical religions and stuff, and I get to make them in my own religion, which is that's a bad way of describing it, but you get the idea. I'm not confined to one particular dogma. I get to see what's the most biblical and go with that. And there's a bit of truth on either side, a bit of non-truth on either side. So that's like that with pretty much any worldview or religion. I think so. So yeah. What's my view on heaven and hell? And this will eventually answer the questions at hand, because that's ultimately what we're trying to do. So heaven, in my view, is the kingdom of God. Heaven is Israel, ultimately. It's the Israel that's going to come from heaven and be on earth. And that's the closest thing to heaven that we're going to get to. Because we're not going to be some fat babies floating around on the clouds with harps. I don't think that's that's not our destiny. Rather, heaven's going to come down to earth, and it's going to be Israel, Jerusalem. It's going to rule the entire world as this empire, in a sense. And it is going to be an empire. It's not going to be one really big Israel, because there's going to be governors and provinces, as we see in Isaiah and Ezekiel and Revelation. But there's going to be a problem, because the righteous people they go to heaven, to this Israel place. They get raptured to the other side of the world, not really to the sky. It's interesting. One question is, if the rapture was going to the sky, why would all the Christians around the world go up? You'd think that they'd all go to one place. Some would be going sideways. Either way, everyone goes to that heaven. But then in that sense, it's not really like there's streets of gold, and there are houses, but the houses are different sizes. So there's this sort of inequality in heaven, which is interesting because that means that that means inequality isn't necessarily bad, which I actually believe. Go figure. Inequality isn't really a bad thing. It's it's actually a good thing because it's morally reprehensible to think everything should be equal, at least in outcome. Either way, so heaven is a perfect place because not all the people. Heaven, but they're not in hell. They're in a place where there's less light. Hmm. There's a place where not everything is hunky dory, where there's a bit of pain and suffering, and there's weeping and gnashing of teeth. There's. I think that's what the outer darkness is. It's just a place where it's not completely heaven. It's still in the earth, but they're being ruled with a rod of iron by Jesus, by Yeshua, and that's probably, in my estimation, that's where the people who are good, who are not necessarily Christian, they're not so terrible that they have to burn in hell for eternity. And then uh, the people who sin grievously and they are Christians, I think they will probably not she's a Jew. I think actually Jews probably will get to be in their homeland, in Israel, in the New World, especially if they're particularly uh, persecuted Jew like Anne Frank was. Then yeah, that's she's probably going to end up in heaven in my estimation. As far as Gandhi, I don't know. He's sort of a pagan, but he is sort of he does sort of good stuff. He might end up in that outer darkness place. Not heaven, but not really hell. This is that'd be my guess. As far as the other guy, Phelp, I think that was his last name. Yeah, I don't think that this is another thing that one of the sins that are the most that you can't really they can't be forgotten. Not saying they can't be forgiven, but they can't be forgotten. Is taking the name of God in vain, and that's like sinning in the name of God. That's and that's evil, and only Christians can do that, which is interesting. So that's you know if he when he did what he did, if he was sinning, then I think there is definitely going to be a lot to pay for. Unless he repented, it'd probably still be to his account, but still, it's hard. That's hard to determine because you got to have sympathy. I mean, I bet even for an atheist, you don't want to condemn anyone to hell, and especially for a friendly atheist. So, but as someone who understands that you can't just be a Christian and do whatever you want, That's tough, you know. I don't think he'll end up in hell, but I think probably that place of outer darkness, or maybe a beggar in heaven, you know. One of those places, I would imagine, unless he really just turns around. And that's just my guess. It's not really um, it's not doctrine, but all that is just my guess. It's not doctrine. This after studying the Bible and after getting a feel for what the language means to those people at the time. I think that's uh, that's a pretty, I would say, a comprehensive view of heaven and hell, because I don't think it's as simple as it's been portrayed. And and to answer the question, you know, how do you get into heaven and how do you get into hell? That's, it's really up to God. Of course, having a relationship with God, that's probably the primary factor. Um, where do you go? What is heaven and hell like? As I've said before, I think it varies. Huh? Well, if you watch this, thank you for watching. How do I stop this? Hi.